Well, I hope everyone has a microwave to quickly heat up their dinner.
Yeah, we're a
We're a
little
little
early.
early.
It's so interesting. In the off season, which I call this still my off season, I really like to hike. And
Oh,
so
nice.
I
Yeah.
was out with Cosmo this afternoon. It's a
Mm,
beautiful day. And
yeah.
we got rained out yesterday morning. We were out hiking. We got rained out. And so I was like, oh, let's go a little bit bigger today. And you get going and you're out, and man, we were climbing up, and all of a sudden I looked at my watch and I'm like, oh shoot, I got to get going. I got to get on this podcast. And
Yeah.
so we did a kind of a walk jog
Yeah. Yeah.
on the way back. I'm a big fan of doing hiking when it's cool. Uh,
Mhm.
I know you are too.
Yep.
Like to get out, and we're so fortunate here, like
Mm.
because we have BLM or land all around us.
Yep.
Pretty much in any direction you go, you can be out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. In 20 minutes, you're
Yeah.
in a whole different area. So, did you hit any snow on that side, or?
No, and we went up pretty high, but
Mhm.
I could see snow for sure.
Mhm.
But I think that it was only down to 6,000 feet. I think we
Okay.
probably only got up to 4,500 feet,
Mm.
maybe
Okay.
5,000 feet. But yeah, we're so lucky that we could
Yeah.
just go out, and it's weird. Like I feel like I'm kind of breaking the rules because I don't tend to go into like Red Rock or into. I
Mhm.
just go into the desert and just start walking up trails.
Yeah.
And we were out for an hour and 40 minutes. We saw one person.
Oh, wow.
And it
Yeah.
was really close to town where we saw one
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And there's just that feeling of being in the middle
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the desert and the desert
Mhm.
mountains and just being on your own. You
Yep.
know, it's very clear. I didn't have any music on, didn't have any podcasts on. I'm just out with the dog.
Mhm.
And I think it's really good to do this time of year,
Mhm.
instead of like the long run or the long, just,
Mhm.
get out and do something a little bit different.
Well, yeah, I was out today and I was looking at the mountains. Obviously, I'm on the other side of town, so I can't get to that snow. But I'm like, oh, I gotta get the snowshoes out again and get up there.
Well, there's a ton of snow up at Mount Charleston, that's for sure.
Oh, it looks great. It looks great. But yeah, and I think you and I both have even sort of pushed people in the direction of using hiking for their Ironman training prep, because especially if they're going to be doing a lot of walking for the Ironman, then they should be going out and hiking and enjoying that and training that walking part.
Yeah. Yeah, and not even necessarily. I don't think always think it's just for Ironman training. I
Yeah.
think it's just good for your hips, good for
Hmm.
your strength, and good to be on your feet for
Yeah.
like an hour and 40 minutes of just on my feet
Hmm.
and unsure stepping too, right?
Yep.
So it's like you're almost twisting your ankle every now and then. Like
Hmm.
this is good for your proprioception, good for your balance.
Yeah.
I tend to do where I walk up, like everything here, from the valley, you go up and then you turn around and come
Yeah.
back down.
Right.
This is
Right.
the way it goes here. So I walk up and then I kind of walk jog the way down.
Hmm.
In the sections that the footing's good, I'll jog. If it's a little sketchy, I'll walk because I don't want to risk.
Yeah.
I don't really want to risk anything right now. But I find that it's really quite good and quite stimulating.
Well, and that downhill is that eccentric loading, which is really can be a benefit, and it's controlled. It's not like you're getting the running eccentric loading that would be doing a lot of muscle damage. So,
And I'm not going fast. I'm
yeah.
literally like just basically
Hmm.
the slowest jog I can do
Yeah.
because I don't want to hurt myself. And
Hmm.
but yeah, I did 3 or 4 hikes
That's
this week.
great.
Well, we're still trying to get back. I'm doing slowly getting back to work after the break,
Yeah.
and it's been a weird week because the weather's been just kind of all over the place.
It has. Yeah. This is cold for us. It was 40 something this morning. I'm like, oh, this is cold. That's
We gotta take
terrible.
advantage of it because, like in the summer, I can't go do that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's just too dang hot to just zip out into the desert. Like maybe I could do it for a little bit, but my dog can't.
Yeah. Right. Right. But this is a good time to do some different things like the hiking, like the snowshoeing or what have you, and still work in that fitness and get ready for the season, which does have a way of sneaking up on us, though.
I actually busted out my rollerblades too. I was gonna do some roll. I got them all tuned
Nice.
up this week, and I was gonna
Yeah,
go and once again it was yesterday when it was all raining. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna
yeah,
go in the
yeah.
rain. maybe Sunday I'll do a little rollerblade with, and I bought the cross country ski poles that actually go in, so you can actually they have a special tip
Yeah,
going to the asphalt.
nice.
So I'm actually going to get an upper body workout
That's great.
as well. And once again, it's the time of year to do
Yeah,
these.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, rollerblading's great. I see one or two people on our side of town, out on the multi-use trail,
Yep.
rollerblading, and that's fun. I haven't rollerbladed though in probably 20 years at this point.
See, like it's so weird because growing up as a Canadian, I could skate.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I could
right.
skate. Pretty much when I could walk, I could skate.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ingrained in me that it's not,
Well, but that's interesting because I always thought rollerblading was more like skiing than skating.
it's a lot like cross country skiing.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
really is, but it's kind of a mix. And I did a lot of cross country skiing when I was in Canada too.
yeah.
But yeah, and when you have the poles with you
Yeah.
and you're pushing off at the same time, and the poles actually provide a lot of balance uh,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for you as well. It's pretty fun to do, and I actually haven't done it in a couple of years, and that's why I had to take it all apart, and I lubricated all the bearings. I'm
Oh,
like,
nice.
I'm ready to go, and then it was
Yeah.
like yesterday just was not happening. I'm so
Well,
soft here, right? It's
yeah, we will, probably in about 2 weeks, we'll be pretty clear of on any bad weather. So,
yeah, exactly,
and
exactly.
then we really start getting our sights on stuff. So, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is putting your sights on a particular event
Yep.
and then working towards it. So, how do you approach that? How do you identify your key races? Because you do a lot of racing. They
Yeah.
can't all be key races. Well, I guess they could, but
Well, they could, but then they would all be subpar, I think.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So it's funny when we talked about that we're going to talk about this today. I was like, well, I actually don't have an A race this year
yeah, right, right.
yet.
Yeah,
Right? So I tend to look at an A race as a qualifier for something, right?
right.
Usually for the 70.3 worlds, I
Mhm.
will target one race that's the race I'm gonna qualify, for the world championship. And pretty much all the racing I have set up is gonna qualify for the Finland race, which I've already qualified for.
Yeah,
So I'm starting to think of maybe a later fall race, which I don't have determined, to get me a New Zealand spot.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So I tend to look at those as like the A races. I used to do a lot of I think I did it 3 times, like the long course nationals. That to me
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
an A race. And it's funny to say, like, but even the world championships in Finland is not an A race.
yeah, right, right, right.
It's more like I'm going for the
Just
experience.
go, yeah, right. Enjoy
If
it.
I'm going to try my best, but it's
Yeah.
not something I need to peak at because I'm not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so yeah, it's weird. Usually by now I really have an A race picked
Yeah.
out. So how like that's kind of my philosophy is like it's a qualifier.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, how about you?
Yeah, that it's interesting because I really have not sat around and said, okay, this is the A race I'm going to do. My mindset is, if I'm towing the start line, I'm going to try to do the best I can. But as you've talked about this, I do agree with you that, I'm looking at, like Oceanside. I'm going to use that to hopefully qualify. And if I don't, then I'm going to go, to Hawaii and do that, or St. George and then in Hawaii. And so each one will be, sort of an A race, if you will.
But if you
But
qualify in Oceanside, then
yeah,
then it's a lot less pressure on the next races,
that's
right?
right. Then those races sort of come off the priority list, still going and doing them.
Yeah.
But then it shifts to, I did sign up for Ironman Lake Placid. I'd like to do that,
Yeah.
but not for qualifying anything, mostly just to get a little revenge on that race and get that back. So, then my focus would shift far more towards that prep versus a 70.3 prep. So
No.
that, I guess it's a little bit dynamic.
Well, and we've talked about this before. I know you want to go to New Zealand.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, I got Indian Wells 2023 already on my,
Right? So you
yeah,
do have something that
yeah,
probably if you were to pick one race, like
no.
I mean, obviously you want to go to Finland, but I think you want to go to New Zealand more than you want to go to Finland.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would. But so I guess I would have two A races really. with Oceanside and then Indian Wells, because I've been, first crack at trying to
Yeah.
get that. But it's funny, when I've talked with a lot of people on our Las Vegas Tri Club Spotlight, a lot of times their A race may actually be their very first race. And I'm thinking, this spring it's Rage, and Rage is often an A race for a lot of people, and not only for performance, but even just completing a triathlon.
Yeah.
And an A race does not have to be time goal or what have you. It just may be your race that you're really sort of focusing in on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Maybe it's a focused race.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people that I've talked to, it's like the longest race of the year. So if they're going to do an Ironman,
Yeah.
right, that will be their A race, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
that has to be the
Yeah.
focus, especially if
Right.
they are relatively new to doing long distance,
Mm-hmm.
or they're going to do their first 70.3.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's lots of people in our club that have
Mm-hmm.
talked about, oh, I really want to do my first 70.3. That's their A race then.
Yeah.
Right? Even if they're going to go do Rage or do some other local races that are short course,
Mm-hmm.
building towards their first 70.3 or building towards their first
Mm-hmm.
Ironman or an Ironman. Have you come across the same thing with people you've talked to?
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And as we're sort of defining this as we go along, and I even think, that focused race becomes an A race when you're going to involve everything you can to get ready for it, which I'm over, thinking a taper. Not all races do you taper for, but you do taper for your races that you really want to do well in. And again, well doesn't necessarily need to be a time-based
Yep.
definition. It could, well could be you want to finish and feel like were able to push it like I did, that was my goal at my last race, or just finishing a race, that may be, doing well is really what that focus is on.
So before we get into the positives of A racing, what do you think are some negatives or some pitfalls to having an A race or selecting one?
That's interesting. I think we talked with, was it Lauren Goss about this, where I can't remember which interview we did, but that was something that I was really interested in how they approached that, or how they coached people who have this target race. They build up, maybe it was Mark Allen, they build up, build up, build up. This is the race, this is the race, this is the race. And then it doesn't go as planned. And now how do you deal with that? What could be a disappointment? And, how do you recover from that to where, you sort of regroup and go for the next race? And so I think that's the danger to me of saying this is an A race. Because what if something happens even within your control or outside your control? Flat tire, or maybe the swim is canceled or something, or you get a bomb cyclone and
You get a cold, right? Like,
yeah,
or you get COVID.
yeah, right. You get sick, right?
You get sick.
Mhm.
One of the things, and we've talked about this before, is this is very stressful and very
Mhm.
strenuous.
Yeah.
And getting sick 2 or 3 weeks before a race
Mhm.
is a common thing.
Yeah, right.
And it can very much disrupt your A race of the year.
Mhm.
And I think that, good planning needs to also have an acceptability that, it might not happen.
Yeah, right.
So maybe you have a BA race.
Yeah, right.
Like you were saying with Oceanside, like you've got a backup.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
You have two backups.
Yeah.
And that's I think a good way to look at it, because you never know, right? Like
Mhm.
something could happen in the next 12 weeks or 11 weeks before Oceanside that derails you.
Mhm.
And to have a backup is not a bad idea.
Right.
You know?
Well, no, yeah, you're spot on with that. I like that a lot. And I like your question about what's the negative aspect of the A race is that can also put stress on relationships.
I was gonna that was gonna be my answer.
Because you're like, no, this is the race. We were talking about hiking before. If you got an A race on calendar, you may not go hiking because you don't want to twist your ankle. So you're not doing that thing that you would normally do with whomever. And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's totally true. So, it's Friday night. you and I have a date on Friday night, but a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
people
right.
don't. And maybe your A race is 3 or 4 weeks away, and you got a big weekend, and
Yep.
your significant other or your friends are getting together on a Friday night, and you're like,
Mhm.
I can't go out because
Yep.
I know that I've got a big weekend of training.
Yep.
Or they're doing something on Sunday and you get a 5, 6 hour bike ride, and like, I can't miss it.
Right.
And so I think that it does affect
Mhm.
relationships.
Mhm.
Marie has this, is my wife. She has the term, it's called Ironman brain,
Oh.
right? And it goes two things. There's two things that are associated with it. It's this ultra focus on the only thing that's
Yeah.
important is
Yeah.
the training, but it's also, you don't think quite right. Like,
Right. Right.
you put the ice cream in the fridge instead of the freezer, and you
Right.
know that's so Ironman brain kind of goes both ways. You get this
Mm.
ultra focus, but
Yeah.
then you also do a lot of dumb things
Mhm.
because you're just fatigued all the time and you're tired, and because the training is hard and
Yeah.
there's a lot of it. Um, so yeah, I think that we do need to really think about how much we're going to give up
Mhm.
to have a true A race. And
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, on my notes, getting ready for this talk, I did have that relationship thing on here. And, you do need to really be respectful of whoever else is with you in your household or your friends or what have you, because this triathlon, a race or whatever, should have a positive effect on your life and not a negative effect. And I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't thinking that way at all, but that's exactly what, my ideas are is it's got to be positive. And if you're not adding to your relationship or that's not adding to it's not going to help your training at all.
yeah, and it's hard because you want to try and do both, right? You
Hmm.
want to have really positive relationships with people, but you want to excel.
Yeah.
Best thing you can do is, have people around you that get it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and it's really hard when you have people around you that don't get it.
Well, and when you're in the moment, sometimes it's hard to see it, and this is why it is nice to have a coach because a coach can sometimes be that objective voice in terms of identifying when the stress is getting too much. But then lo and behold, if you get injured, like or get sick, like you talk about, the amount of stress that causes not only just to the body but to the brain. That you've got, well, I've only got 6 weeks to the race and now all of a sudden dealing with this injury. That is incredibly stressful, and that has a way of boiling over into other parts of your life. And so, triathlon has to be approached with a real healthy perspective. And when we're sitting here talking about, setting up an A race, it's all in the context of it has to be positive for your life.
Okay, so any other negatives?
Any other negatives? I guess expense. Sometimes A races are a little expensive.
Yeah, yeah. If you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to go to Europe for an A race. Yeah, that's good.
Right, right.
You're exactly right. So I think budgeting, right? Um,
Yeah.
I get a little crazy around my A races with buying stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Oh, I gotta have that. Oh, I gotta have that. Like, no,
yeah,
that's you know, and it's ridiculous. And I probably wouldn't buy it had it
yeah.
not be, just this A race. I put everything into it. Oh, what's a couple $100 for this? And it actually can get out of hand really quickly.
Oh, totally. I can see that with you and the gear and what have you. Or sometimes I see people buying multiple pairs of shoes at that time to try out which one's going to be best. I think you've done that.
But not for an A race. I don't think I've ever did that for an A
Yeah.
race. I do that
Um,
well in advance. But
but the expense is also the buying of nutrition.
oh yeah.
And we talk about training the gut and trying to get that ready. Well, that can be expensive if you're going to go use some gels are what, $4 a gel, and it's like, well, you use 5 of them on a bike ride, and it's like, oh, that's a $20 bike ride.
Oh, it's exactly. No, I think that's the other negative is probably expense. Okay, so let's switch it and let's talk about positives
Okay.
of actually selecting an A race.
Hmm.
So I think the number one positive is just focus, right? It
Yeah.
actually has some focus. You have it on your calendar. Um, it motivates you.
Hmm.
So the day you don't feel like training,
Hmm. Yeah.
and you easily could,
Yeah.
You're like, oh, my race, it's not for 12 more weeks.
Right, right.
But when it's the A race, it's like, well, it's only 12 weeks.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I Whereas if you don't have that, or you
yeah,
sign up for some race that you really don't care too much about,
yeah.
you might not have that same motivation, on a crummy day to get outside and do it, or to get on the trainer,
Yep.
and spend 3 or 4 hours on the trainer.
Hmm.
It's a hard thing to do. Um, or, if you don't like swimming, to get into the pool and go for a swim. So I think having an actual A race, it can really help focus your motivation to train.
Hmm. No, that's a great point, and I certainly live by that because yeah, if I don't have a race on the calendar, I do tend to not train as much or as frequently. So it is nice to have that, that race on the calendar and a reminder because, training program is all about trying to predict the future. And, we're trying to build fitness now that will get the reward in 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10, whatever down the road.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's critical. It's interesting. When I first started getting back into endurance sports, I always had to have a race on the calendar.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it was a 5K,
Hmm.
5K in,
Yeah.
3 weeks from now or whatever. And that just kept me motivated. Now,
Hmm.
it got to a point, like, during COVID, I was still motivated
Yeah.
because I'd been doing this for so many years. And
Hmm.
especially in the beginning of COVID, we didn't know how long it was going to last, right?
Oh,
We're
right, right.
thinking, oh, just a few more months.
Hmm.
I got to be training now while I can, because you never know.
Hmm.
And I didn't really suffer from lack of motivation
Hmm.
during that time, but early on in my triathlon career, having things on a calendar really helped me.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And so yeah, it's nice to have a race and then have a reminder, whether that's electronic, using some type of program where your workouts go in, or I always talk about I make a wristband for I guess what would be my A race, or at least a race that I'm sort of training for overall, just as a reminder. Because you're right, it's like some days you wake up and you're like, oh, what am I doing? But then you get a little gentle reminder, oh, I need to get so fit by this period of time, so I got to do something today or what have you. So it does help.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what else do you see as positives?
Uh, well, I think it's healthy, and if you can set it up, set your goals, so your goals are going to lead to a healthy approach to triathlon. Set your goals so that they're not necessarily time based, because a lot of times in an event you can't control certain elements, whether it's transition length or changing conditions or what have you. For me, a lot of the goals need to be more sort of I don't know, motivational based, but not necessarily time based or even position based. And you and I have talked about this a lot. Is that I try not to approach a race and say, oh, I want to win my age group, because I don't know who else is going to be there, and so that's something that's totally out of my control. So I think the positive of this is really the healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know, I love the fact that we talked about this. Is like, you should not pretty much never set a goal unless you're a professional triathlete to win a race.
Yeah, yeah, right,
You want to win. I want
right,
to win every race I do.
yeah, yeah, right, right, right,
I do. I
yeah,
really do. When
yeah,
I'm on the, when I'm out
yeah,
training and I'm on the start, like, I want to win.
yep,
But I'm also very much accepting of, and we've talked about this before, of looking internally, did I have a
mhm,
good race? And did I
right,
did I do the things I needed to do on the day?
hmm,
And if I finish first, or if I finish 50th,
yep,
80th, or whatever the case may
hmm,
be,
hmm,
I can be happy
yeah,
either way.
yeah,
And I think especially around an A race, I think that's really critical.
hmm,
Is, oh man, like, I was fourth, and you know it's only 20 seconds off a third, and blah 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 blah.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
at the time, you did the best you could do.
yeah, right,
You
right,
can't control other people.
yeah,
And I think that we can get caught up in that in A racing, as well, when we put so many eggs in the basket.
yeah.
And so I think this is also maybe a good time to start to think about that stuff.
No, you're right, because that's the mental skills part, and I've made the mistake of trying to go and have a goal of certain position. Then you see someone go by you when we used to mark ages on the calf, right? And so I'll go, there goes another one of my age group. And then you go down this negative spiral. So I think, having an A race, trying to approach it with the mental skills to avoid that. And really your goals are more built up on what you can do. I think that ends up benefiting not only your race, but it actually helps benefit you in life as well.
I agree.
What else do you have?
So I was actually going to talk more about like the building up to an A race.
Okay.
You want to go down that road?
Yeah. No, that's good. I've got a few more in here that we'll get to as we do that. So that's good.
So in general, when I have an A race on the calendar, I start to, build a plan to like build my fitness. I think you were mentioning this. So to build my fitness. And once again, we've talked a lot about incremental building, right?
Mhm.
Obviously the biggest I don't know, thing we've talked about the most, or thing we've talked about the most is consistency of training.
Mhm.
But when we're building, we want to be consistently adding more volume and or intensity, usually not at the same time, one or the other, and building towards, the A race. Now, within that, we can, we want to go really, slow and controlled, right? We talked about ramp rate before.
Yeah.
We want to build and ramp our training because the body needs overload. We
Mhm.
talked about the principle of overload before, is we need to keep giving a little bit extra stimulus, a little bit extra stimulus, a little bit extra stimulus with proper recovery,
Yeah.
and we can build fitness. There's no magic to building endurance and building fitness. There really isn't.
Mhm.
It's, can we progressively overload the system and allow time for recovery?
Yeah.
And when you have a plan where it's like something like 12 weeks away, you can start to forecast out,
Mhm.
where you're going to be.
Yeah.
If my goal is to run a 1:30 half marathon in a race, I can plan that out.
Mhm.
It might not happen. My plan might not work,
Yeah.
right? But I can start to plan out what will it take for me to do this, right? Or if I want to ride 200 watts for a 70.3 bike course.
Mhm.
Well, if right now, and I can just tell you it's today. All right. So today I did a Zwift ride this morning. It was about the distance of doing a half Ironman. It was about 2.5
Okay.
hours. And I was just kind of seeing like what wattage could I do? So I think today I was like 193 watts for 2.5
Yeah,
hours.
that's good.
It's good, right? Because I'm,
Oh,
I'm in the off season. But I mean, when I finished, I couldn't have ran off of that.
right.
Right. So I'm like, okay, that's where I am today.
Yeah.
Now, my first real race of the year is like one I care about is Oceanside. So
Mhm.
I'm starting to think of like, if I want to ride at Oceanside and I want to ride 215 watts
Mhm.
for the 2 hours and 2.5 hours and be able to run off of it, what do I need to do
Yeah.
in the next 12 weeks? And I'm starting to think like that. It's like, how am I going to build towards this race
Mhm.
to make that happen?
Yep.
How am I going to be able to run how I want to run and swim how I want to swim? And it's a good, at this time of the year, I think it's as we're starting to get into training for the season, is to start having those kind of thoughts in your head of where am I at
Mhm.
and where do I want to be at my goal race? Let's call it
Mhm.
a goal race. And between now and then, I'm going to do a few other races. I'm going to
Mhm.
at least one half marathon. I'm going to probably do rage or do something, a shorter triathlon
Okay.
before, as more like a warm up / test.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I need to start to come up with a plan in swim, in bike, and in run to meet the goal that I want to
Mhm.
get to in each of those. And then, like, and putting them together, right? So I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. Whereas the race the ride I did today, I was able to successfully complete it, but I couldn't run a half marathon off of
Yeah,
that.
right.
I could run it, which wouldn't be it would be a struggle.
And nor should you be able to right now.
No, I
That's
shouldn't, right?
that's right.
And that's okay.
Yep.
Is to say that. But so now, if I test myself again, let's say in a couple of weeks on that exact same event
Mhm.
on Zwift, I'm hoping that I'll be either the same wattage, but feel better,
Yeah.
right? Or a little bit more wattage and still feel crummy.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And keeping track of those things and putting these in your training diaries and or if you have a coach, the coach watching this progression and allowing that progression to occur, I think is important
Yeah. I love it.
if you want to be successful at those races.
All right, so I've got two things on my list that cross over very nicely with what you just went through. One is I like this part right here. I have assess your training program, and there's lots of different ways to assess it, like you're talking about with doing the fit or doing the ride and comparing that ride to a ride in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and see how you are progressing either in perceived exertion or in the amount of wattage that you can sustain, or what's happening with your heart rate. That's a great way to assess your what's happening physiologically or even biomechanically. And then the other one I have is setting up your calendar. And so I love it. You pick your A race out and you build your program. But I also, and we talked about this a little bit last week, I also like to put down the dates of other races, other events, other work events that I may have. If I know I got a conference coming up, if I know I got a presentation I got to do for a certain group, then I try to put that on my calendar. And family events, birthdays, anniversaries, even social events, try to put them in the calendar so that as I hit that week or, even 2 weeks or whatever it is, I can look at it and say, okay, I know I need to adjust my training or at least know that my training is going to be different during this period of time.
Yep. No, I think I think it's good. It's and not everyone needs that,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
Some people don't like that much structure, but
Mm-hmm,
I think it's a self-realization of what you personally
mm-hmm,
need. Because I don't put my calendars as tight, I don't think, as you do.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have my calendars, and I think we talked about last week. Like my wife and I went over the race calendar for the year,
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
she knows, and I have that built in, and I've I got things like spring break built in, like
yeah, yeah, right.
because spring break is 2 weeks before Oceanside, so that's a
Yeah,
great
right,
time to
yeah,
train.
yeah.
Right? For us, is like we don't have to work that week, so that's a big training block.
And I also like having that dedicated time. But again, and like you said, what is what works for me is having, a dedicated time that I know I'm going to be able to train and I block it out in my calendar. And I get that from an old college professor who he always had a meeting from 11 to 12:30 or 11 to 1. I forget what it was. And he always, back then, an analog calendar. So you would on his door say, no, he's got a meeting, during this period of time. And lo and behold, what it was is actually it's time to go for a run.
Yeah,
And I love that. I thought that was a great way to do it because he's forced himself to say, I blocked out this time and I'm going to go run at that time.
no, I actually think that for the time-starved athlete, especially,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is really, really important. You
Hmm.
know, I've talked to several people that are really struggle to get the hours of training in, and
Hmm.
so then the question I always ask them is like, well, do you have a lunch break?
Yeah,
Yeah, I do. Okay, well, how long is it? Well, it's an hour. I'm like, okay,
right.
can you go for a 40-minute run?
Hmm.
Like bang for your buck. Like, can you
Hmm.
get out the door and just go?
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay, well, go do it then. And
Hmm.
you really need an hour for lunch?
Hmm.
Right? Go for your 40-minute run, then come back and eat, and then get back to work. I mean,
Yeah.
and once again, if it's in your calendar that this is the time I'm blocked out for a run, it makes it a lot easier to do.
Hmm.
And especially when somebody else like, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Oh, I got to run on my calendar.
Yeah, right, right.
It's a little easier, I think.
Yeah. No, for sure. I love it. All right. So then, as you build your program, when do you start really dissecting the race, the course, the terrain, and do you start thinking about going and training on the course if it's maybe a local race or within a drive? I mean, how do you approach that?
So I'm an overanalyzer. I
Yeah.
think we talked a little bit about this last week. I'm total overanalyzer. If I can get on the course, oh, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's in St. George, it's obviously easy to get up there. But like if I know the course like the back of my hand, like the 70.3 at St. George, because we've done it so many times in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't need to go up there
Yeah,
anymore.
right, right.
Like I like to go up there, but I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Oceanside. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know every bit of that course.
Yeah,
Um, and you can't train on the bike course down there anyways.
right.
So, you know, I think if you can, that's great. What I like to do is I like to mimic the courses here. And I know we talked about this is a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
but like I have a run course set up that mimics the St. George course in
Mhm. Okay.
the climbs are about the same. They're, and as I'm 3, 4 weeks away, I'll go do that course a few
Okay.
times.
Mhm.
And that that does help me. And then same with the bike. So, Oceanside has got those 3 climbs, right?
Mhm.
So I can mimic those here,
Mhm.
right? And set them up so they're an hour in, do the 3 climbs. And then I think we talked about this last week as well, like setting it up so I go into the wind on the way home.
Mhm.
And you can do this. Now the hard thing is when you can't get you don't know the course
Yeah.
and you can't get there.
Right.
So for example, the next race after Oceanside for me is Morro Bay. There's no course maps even up here,
That's right. First
right?
time.
First time, I
No.
have no idea.
Mhm.
There's rumors.
Mhm.
Now, fortunately, I was there training last summer, and
No.
after they announced the race, and I have a pretty good idea talking to some locals there of where they think the race course is going to.
Okay.
But we do know pretty much it's going to be a flat run. At least that's
Mm.
what they said.
Okay.
So, and then Oceanside's a flat run.
Yep.
So I know that I got to do some flat run, flat
Yeah.
running.
Right.
But flat running's easy.
Mhm.
The other thing for me is looking at like swims and swim
Mm.
temperatures.
Mhm.
So we do know that Oceanside's cold water swim,
Yep.
right? For you, St. George, cold water swim.
Mhm.
So starting to think about those things, and and as much as we hate it, like going to the lake in March,
Yeah. Right.
right, and getting into that cold water for a half an hour, and
Mhm.
but that's one thing that's getting close to the race. And so the next thing on my list, actually, this kind of adds into this, was when to add the specificity.
Mm. Mhm.
You know, that's something that when you specifically look at A races, you should, you know, be very general training leading to more specific training,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is well known in the literature. And we look at like high level coaches, they use this philosophy of race specificity.
Mhm.
Um, whether that's course based or distance based or whatever the case may be, the closer you get to the race, the more specific it needs to be. So you mentioned earlier about the walking in an Ironman.
Mhm.
If you know you're going to be walking a lot of the Ironman, why are you at a track doing 10 by 400s
Mhm.
fast as you can on the track running?
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
it's not realistic to what you're going to do.
Mhm.
Or if you're in the pool and you're doing 100 repeats and you're all out, but you're going to be an hour and 40-minute swim, maybe what you should be doing is some long swims without rest.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think that the timing of that stuff and how you go into more general training into specific training is art.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is very much art.
No, for sure. The art and the science, because we know that you're going to respond to the specificity that, if you want to be a good runner, you got to run. If you want to be a good biker, you got to bike and so forth. I mean, there's some crossover, obviously, with what we're doing, especially in multi-sport. But, even backing up a little bit to the course and the specificity fits into this, it's the familiarity. For me, and again, sometimes you have to know yourself as an athlete. And I know for me, if I've got a key race, I want to be as familiar as possible with as much of the course, the surroundings as possible. That's just how I am. Some people, my wife is very different. She doesn't need that, but I need that. I need to, get to a race early if I can't get to it ahead of time. Drive the course, become as familiar with that course as possible. Maps. What is there now? What the different Ruby does different courses on video, but you're right, the one that you've got, there's not going to be one for that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But even the specificity is be familiar with the intensity you want to race at. And so that actually fits that same sort of approach.
So I contend that this fall, when I raced the 70.3 Worlds, I was not in very good shape to do it. But I contend I probably was, I don't know, I'm gonna throw 10 minutes of faster than I would have been had I not known the course.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that course so
Yeah,
well. I know
right,
where
right,
every little climb is. I know where
right.
if I'm going to turn, I'm going to be into a headwind here.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to catch a tailwind here if the wind's going this way. All of those little things,
Mm-hmm.
even on the run, I know every little corner. Now I know they changed a little bit of it this time when we ran through the golf course, but knowing every little section of the race
Mm-hmm.
makes you faster. As
Yeah.
long as if you're a cerebral person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right, for an A race, if you can get to the place and
Yeah.
get on the course.
And likewise, if it's Rage or Pumpkin Man, which are two very characteristic A races for us locals, go ride the course, go run the course, go swim in Lake Mead, bike the hill for Pumpkin Man. I mean, that's a great
And do
that's
it
a
over
great
and over again.
that's right, and just become familiar with it.
Because I think the Pumpkin Man bike course in particular, you can gain a lot by riding that course, by
Yeah,
figuring out where the
yeah,
little steep
oh yeah,
sections are, where
hmm
those little turns are in the desert.
yeah,
I think that you could gain a lot of time, and not just time, but just decreased stress
hmm
by knowing the course that
yeah,
well.
yeah. No, I think that's so important. And if it's your A race, read the athlete guide if there is one. But at least go through the details that the race director is giving you.
Yep. And
Uh,
go to the athlete briefing if there is one.
Go to the athlete, even if you've been to so many of them before, you still go, and you never know when you hear something that, oh, I didn't know that. So,
I only really go to the athlete briefings now if it's my A race.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If it's a race I really don't really care about, especially if
yeah,
I've been there before several times. I'm like if I was just going to a regular 70.3 in
yeah.
Oceanside, which I'm going to, I'm not going to the athlete briefing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've volunteered for a few races now for Ironman. It's always funny when you can tell when the people have not read the athlete guide. Indian Wells was one. I was sitting at the information booth after the race, and people they didn't know that they couldn't get back to the start
Uh,
after they finished because it's a point-to-point type of race. So
well, I always read the athlete guide.
yeah,
I
yeah,
always,
yeah, yeah,
sometimes the athlete briefings are at really inconvenient times,
yeah.
especially if you get a
Well,
family and you got
now they're recording a lot of them and then putting them up on YouTube, which is nice. So,
true.
but I like the idea of being as familiar as possible because it's one less thing to stress about when you're, getting ready for the race the night before or even the day of, you just have it all worked out. Even, being familiar with at the end of the race, how you're going to meet up with whoever, is there with you, whether it's even one of our local races or a big race. It's just nice to know, to have a plan post race, how to connect with each other.
Yep. The other thing for me that I had written down for the A race is my bike tech skills go up.
Oh yeah, okay.
Intricate I am with cleaning my bike,
Yeah.
always
hmm
new tires for an A race.
hmm
Like
Yeah.
maybe I'll even throw a new cassette on. Like
hmm
there's gonna be it's for the race of the year. I'm leaving like
Yes.
nothing to
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
And I might go through my bike with a torque wrench and just make sure every bolt that I can get to is
Yeah.
torqued,
I love it.
right, because it's an A race. Like it's
Yeah.
the race, and I don't, there's bad things that can happen, but I don't want to,
Be
you know,
surprised.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be surprised, and I want to be like, okay, I crossed that off. That's important for me personally to make sure. Hey, another one, make sure your Di2 is charged, right, John?
Oh yeah. Right. Right. Man, that was silly.
But I do think like with the bike tech, that stuff, and then we've talked about it before, is I will have for pretty much all my races, I have lists and lists of lists. But for the A race, I like probably triple check my lists.
Yeah, yeah.
Just one more little step.
Yeah, no, I love the checklist idea, and I actually have gear down on my list of things to bring up too. Make sure you have the right gear for the course. Warm, cold, rainy, cassette or whatever it is. Know the course and know the environment, and then have the right gear. But yeah, you're right. You do get a little neurotic. Not you. We all do get a little neurotic with our gear as we get closer. And
Speaking of cassettes, I love being on like the Facebook groups and Slow Twitch before a race, and I was like, "Well, what cassette should I run?" Like,
yeah, right,
how do we
right.
know you?
Yeah,
What
right,
wattage do you put out?
right.
What's your
Yeah,
front chain ring? What's
right.
It always happens at Oceanside because nobody can pre-ride the
Yeah,
course,
yeah, right.
and everyone's on. Oh, I'm doing I have an 11:30. Great. Should
Yeah,
I do an 11:28?
yeah,
Who knows?
yeah,
Like you can look at the profile and that there's an 8 to 9% climb that's going to be 4 minutes.
yeah,
Like I can't tell you which cassette you need,
right.
right? Because I don't know like
Yeah.
once again, how much power are you putting on? How heavy are
Mhm.
you? How heavy is your bike? Once again, what's the front? What are your cogs like in the
Yep.
front? Or your chain rings like in the front? It's so funny to see this. This is stuff you should have figured out a long time ago.
Yeah, right, right. No, for sure. And you got to know yourself and you got to know your gear as well. So, mm,
I've seen people, you tend to see people that usually that are not kind of the pointy end of the race with really the wrong gear.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
it makes their race way more difficult. And this happens at Oceanside.
Oh
That
yeah,
first
right,
climb,
right.
especially used to be where we would start in waves based off the age groups.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that first climb, the amount of people that were walking their bike up the hill,
Quite a bit.
that
Mm-hmm.
just tells me your gear is inappropriate. There should be nobody that can't ride up 9% or 10%
Right.
if you've got the right
Mm-hmm.
the right setup on your bike.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
if you're coming in with a huge front chain ring and 11:25, you're not going to be able to get up
Yep.
that, you know,
Mhm.
if you especially if you're not strong, you're not going to be able to get up that.
Well, and this is going back to what we said before, be familiar with the course. If you can, you try to get on the course. If you can't, there's YouTube videos, there's race reports you can read. Try to become as familiar as possible on that.
And when in doubt, err on the side of caution.
Yeah, right, right.
If
All
you're
right.
not sure if you should run an 11:25 or an 11:28 or 11:30, go with the higher one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because most likely, even if you lose the 11 and you have to go to a 12, just because of whatever cassette's available, you're probably going to be okay because not everybody spins out and runs out of gear on the big side like that. So,
Yeah, exactly.
all right. So like maybe this theme is more just being familiar. I have planned logistics out, of the A race and really race week. And I think knowing, again, this is knowing yourself as an athlete, what you're like on race week and how big of a race this really is for you. That race week, it's just nice to have things sort of, for me, again, this is how I am. I like to have things sort of planned out enough that I'm not trying to make a lot of decisions that week.
Yeah, I was gonna go another different route on this one as far as the week of, and I was thinking more of the tapering.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I think the logistics are good. Uh,
Hmm.
Got to have things planned out when you're going to do what you're going to do, and don't overcommit.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've overcommitted, like
Yeah.
especially the day before a race. Oh, we'll have time to watch a movie. You don't have time the day before. About an A
Hmm.
race, you got so much going on,
Yeah.
especially if it's a point-to-point race.
Yeah.
That day needs to be all triathlon the day before.
Hmm.
But then the I think the taper is a really interesting one, and we should probably do a full podcast on
We should. Yeah.
just on
Hmm.
tapering and the different theories and different philosophies. The one thing that I've kind of come to the conclusion of in a taper, and you can practice a taper in your off weeks, right, or
Hmm.
in your rest weeks, is you should feel like, and I got this from somebody else, I don't remember who it was, but you should feel like you want to race the day before.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, man, if today was the day I'd race, I'd crush it.
Hmm.
And you want to make the mistake of being a day too early all the time and never a day late.
Yeah.
You know, I once again, I've done it where I've gotten into a race and I'm like, oh my gosh, my legs are no good.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want that to be on my A race.
Yeah.
I'd rather be 2 days early when my
Mhm.
feet start to feel good than even one day late. I can usually put out the same amount of power. It's just going to be mentally that much harder for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that practicing your tapering on your maybe on a B race, which you might not want to, give up that time and do a true taper, but
Mm-hmm.
can you get it close in your B race? Um, but I've talked to a lot of people about this that have kind of missed the taper and they went into the race not as fresh as they could be or should.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And actually, I am putting in our comments there. We actually did do a podcast on tapering, but I think it's that important that we should come back and do it again. Because I love that advice of that you should want to be on the start line. And I love the point also that you made that you can practice this during your training session. I pay attention whenever I take a day off. I try to really pay attention to how I feel the next day training or the next 2 days out from a one day taking one day off. And I try to really pay attention to that so then I can try to build that feeling into a taper because tapering is, the art of trying to, get things sharp and race ready. And it's not always easy. But that race week is an important part of that taper. It's that final, putting the last touches on that training program so that when you hit that start line, you're ready to go.
Agreed. And I'll even do it where I'll take 2 days off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A big block, just like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm taking 2 days off. And then, okay, how do I feel coming
Yeah.
out of it?
Yeah.
What did 2 days do? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
2 days, I'm still pretty sore. Okay, well, I know that,
Yeah.
that's the effect of doing that when I'm on this amount of training
Mm-hmm.
load.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so smart. And I was also paying attention to that after doing into wells that I'm trying to think ahead because this 2023 has some races that could be really sort of, crunched up against each other. And it's like, okay, well, how long does it take to even recover from a race? Which I know is a little different than tapering, but it's that same mindset of when you're taking time off, how are you feeling the next time that you're training? And a lot of that's subjectiveness, but you can also look at your metrics on, your heart rate and your power as you go along as well.
Well, I would contend it takes longer to recover from an A race than does any other race
Yeah, yeah.
because you're going to usually push yourself a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
It just naturally happens, especially that last 2 or 3 miles on the run when you have it in your mind, this is kind of a do or die.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you go a little harder, which is good. Like you should go as hard as you can go.
Mm-hmm.
Also have an understanding that that fatigue is going to live in you longer.
Yeah.
And so, I've tried it before where I've tried to do back-to-back A races.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And I think it was 2 weeks apart. I did the ITU
Ooh.
Long Course Worlds and then the 70.3 World Championships, 2 weeks
Yeah,
apart.
yeah.
And there was lots to travel in there as well. I had to travel to both races. And I did really well at the first race. And then the second race, and I did everything in my power
Right.
to recover properly, good nutrition, massage right after the race, like everything. And I was still flat.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well,
Because
I like that point that you made that you should not be able to race as well after an A race for a longer period of time than a non-A race because you also have the pre-taper, going into the event. So you've got that 2 or 3 weeks where you're really backing off your training. You do your race, now your recovery. So now you're 4 weeks out from really good training, stimulus in terms of a volume type of thing. So yeah, that's not easy to race after an A race.
yeah. So I think, kind of having that in your mind of like,
Yeah,
might
yeah,
be 3 or 4 weeks later,
yeah.
it's triathlon is so messed up in that, but think about it, John.
Yeah.
Would a marathoner do this?
Hmm.
Would
Hmm.
they do a race and then 2 weeks later want to race again?
No, that's right.
Oh, triathletes, they do it all the time.
No, they do a spring race and then they do a fall race.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
and a good marathoner is like, just to say 2 hours and 20 minutes.
yeah, yeah.
We're talking about people doing an Ironman and then backing it up a month later, doing like another one, or do 70.3, and then as a prep for an
Yeah.
Ironman, and they'll do
Hmm.
that, 4 weeks out. They'll do a 70.3, and then they'll do an Ironman.
Yeah.
That's crazy talk.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do a 5 hour race and then do a 10 to 12 hour race.
Mhm.
Why are triathletes so crazy?
I don't know. But I think this goes back to where we started in terms of goal setting and
Yes,
making sure you're understanding why you are racing and why you're doing some of these big challenges and why you would want to crunch a couple big challenges up back to back. I think it really does, take take, I think we all benefit by taking a step back and really thinking about why we do these because we're not getting paid. We're doing these for fun. And again, I'm big on making sure that our participation in triathlon is positive and healthy from all aspects of our life.
agreed. Yeah,
And back-to-back races don't always
I would not try and do a back to back
you
too
can get a
long.
little grumpy in
Yeah,
between.
too long courses in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I think 4 weeks is about where I could be comfortable with.
yeah. And I think that's again, and you and I are talking about just paying attention to yourself and and how you're feeling. Even though there's a lot of push on metrics and using different devices to get information, it's still subjectively you gotta sort of zero in on yourself and how you're feeling.
Oh, 100%. Because once again, the metrics don't matter if your knee's hurting.
Yeah, right, right. Or if your relationship's suffering, and you can have the best race in the world, but no one's going to remember that. They're going to remember your relationship. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, at your eulogy, they're not going to be, hey, and then he did
yeah,
a 1050
yeah,
Ironman when he was 47. They're
yeah.
not going to talk about that.
No, that's right.
Maybe they should.
Right.
We
Yeah,
should talk about triathlon eulogies and making sure
yeah.
your PRs are all put into your eulogy.
Oh, I don't know. That'd be sort of sad.
Oh goodness.
Because I do these, well, they'll get preachy but it's fun. It's a lifestyle and I enjoy it. So,
You do.
not it's hard to not always let it negatively influence other aspects. So it's easy to fall into that trap.
Absolutely.
But speaking of that, right now I'm smelling some banana bread being baked, and we're
Oh,
gonna we're gonna head out to dinner. So
okay. Well, that great. Have a great night and
yeah,
a great weekend of planning and training and
yep.
um, yeah. When we'll talk next week.
All right, sounds good. You too. Have a good week too.
Okay. Bye bye.